And I'm also panicking right now based on the based on the quote that Ron said yesterday that was mentioned at Davos about the work ahead for me. There's tons of work and expectation related to the domestic implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal. Canada is being seen internationally as a country that should lead the way into the domestic implementation. So, and being leading that unit that is responsible to draft that strategy, create an indicator framework, and work in a way where we need to involve all society, it's quite panicking. So, so I'm just anxious to start the work and start building those relationships. Usually I'm hidden behind a phone, so it's easier for me to talk to the people, the Danny, the Brian here. Now I feel a bit naked here. So, so kind of like, what is the SDG? So yesterday, a lot of people were kind of like asking myself about like what Canada is doing related to this. The SDG is a bit like 5G. Everybody know what it is, but nobody understands what's going to be the impact. So basically, it's kind of like, I really like what John MacArthur, the framing of John MacArthur related to the SDG is really a new compass. So if you use the framework efficiently, it could serve as kind of a vision piece to bring people together and to align action toward like a common goal. What's great also about the SDG is the first time that we create ourselves a common language, not only related to a framework, but also toward indicator. The work of the United Nations has been, they've been working on developing that framework for over 3 years of intensive negotiation, and this is the 17 goals that they basically came out with. I've heard a lot over the past 2 days about transformative agenda. This is one. If well implemented and if it's taken seriously, the power of the SDGs could be really transformative. So just a bit of context, because a lot of people were asking me about context yesterday and positioning the SDGs. So I tried to kind of like made a graph yesterday night at 12:30 after the Raptor game. To compare the MDGs and the SDGs. So it's really kind of like the development angle is totally different, and the universality of the framework of the SDG is totally different. The Millennium Development Goal, having been work on this in an NGO in 2006, were really development related. It was about like top-down approach of like north to south country to help poor country. As well, and for the SDGs, it's really kind of a universal approach where every country should see development in their own context. So this is kind of like, and as you see, there's more goals, there's more. It's more really, it's more targeted, and it's measurement based. So that's really one of the weaknesses that were always identified behind the MDGs. How do we evaluate that? The SDGs give you the kitchen sink. You've got 169 targets, 252 indicators this morning, and 537 sub-indicators. So in terms of measurement, that's kind of like the paradise. So we have 17 goals, 11 years to go. It's an opportunity for all. As I mentioned, it's really, the SDG is about defining sustainable development outside the frame of an environmental context. It's really taking sustainability as a whole. And Canada has also moved on the legal front related to defining sustainability, where Environment Canada just passed the bill C-57 that is basically entrenched in the definition of sustainable development, the 3 pillars, the social, economic, and environmental impact of the SDGs, of sustainable development, sorry. So as I said, what's really ambitious about the 2030 agenda is that it's universal. For the first time, rich country like ours, OECD country, are asked to adopt a domestic approach related to that framework. So a lot of countries have already led the way. Canada signed the SDG in 2015 under our government, and in the government of Canada, the current government has been putting some some resource behind the agenda in 2018. So basically, the agenda is universal. Countries like Germany, Finland, Sweden, Colombia have been like leading the way in the implementation of the SDGs. It's really ambitious and aspirational. And the term aspirational is always come up when talked about the SDGs. It's because we need to be ambitious and we need to aspire to a better world. And we need to sell that to people that are in the field and that are contributing on a daily basis toward the achievement of the SDG. And I had a good discussion yesterday with Ron on the fact that the SDG are interlinked and indivisible. So basically, when you act on one, it will have impact on other. So it's important that we look at the action and the investment in a more holistic ways, and how investment and action will have impact on multiple SDG. So, like I said, the SDG are more than just the environment. It's about the 5P, and I like the branding, being a communication guy. It's easy. The SDGs are about people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnership. So there's multiple image that you can see where the goals fits under it, but it's really at the essence of what we're trying to achieve. Sustainable development, it's meaning taking care of the people, taking care of our planet, and the future generations, so everybody can live a better life. But it's also a lot about the environment. So the environment is embedded in all the 17 goals. There's a lot that the environment is achieving. There's a lot of indicators that are embedded in all the goals. So even though there's a three-pillar approach related to the SDG, the environment is central to the agenda. I really like the University of Chicoutimi, coming from Quebec, so I really like that graph, and it's in French. I didn't have time to translate it, but you can see how the goals and the targets are distributed among the 5P. So you see that when you work on multiple and the integration of multiple goals together, you achieve a lot. So if you work on something that is partnership related and on the planet, you can achieve a greater percentage on impact related to the goals and the targets. So I talk about the Government of Canada's commitment, and this is me being public servant, talking about what has been done. So in budget 2018, that was the real commitment toward the SDG. So 50 million over 13 years was dedicated to create the unit that act as a hub of all the SDG action across Canada. And also $60 million was dedicated to create a funding program, which I'll talk right after that. So naturally, the current political agenda align well with the SDGs, but there's a lot of people, there's a lot of spectrum. Everybody could see themselves into participating into implementing that agenda. What I want to mention here is that Canada last May, and some of you might have been at the United Nations, presented their first voluntary national review. So what does that mean? It's a Canada stock take of where we are related to the agenda. It's a great document. If you haven't had the chance to read it, it's a fantastic one, well written. I was part of it. But it's really kind of like a starting point of like the baseline of where we should start, identifying some gaps that we should be starting to look into addressing. So the governance part in Canada is one of the strengths of the implementation domestically and internationally. So all federal departments are responsible to implement that agenda. So the unit is not replacing the work that department is mandated to be doing, and they're also mandated to embed the SDG in their departmental reporting. So the Minister of Family, Children and Social Development, Minister Duclos, has been identified as the champion of the SDGs. He's a well-renowned expert onto poverty. He puts the people, and he really cares about the SDG. So we're lucky to have like a fantastic champion that put a lot of pressure on me on a daily basis in order to move the needle a bit faster. But also he's got other champions. All the department you see are kind of co-champion co-championing the implementation here domestically. And all these departments have a vested interest not only into the policy design that is linked to the SDGs, but also the reporting aspect of it, which I'll talk a bit later. And the last part is quite interesting, is that we're going to set up an external advisory committee soon in 2020. So there's a lot of people here that I can imagine that could be interesting candidate to be part of that external panel. So if you're interested, do not hesitate to contact me. So the SDG unit, I've talked about it. I'm going to go quickly, but it's kind of it's the hub in Canada. What we do is that we try to raise awareness related to the SDG. We administer the funding program, but also we're responsible for developing the national strategy, working with Statistics Canada on developing that Canadian indicator framework that I'll talk about after. And also anything reporting to the United Nations is the responsibility of the SDG unit. So building a national strategy. Okay. So that's not a small task. And the national strategy is meant to be a whole Canada approach. So therefore, lots of engagement will be required, and we started to do a lot of that. So we had recently an engagement phase between March 15 to May 15, an online phase where we asked Canadians about what should be the pillars or the lever that Canada should put in place in order to establish or implement that agenda domestically. So basically, how we're going to go about building that national strategy, it's going to be twofold. The first section is happening now, is really building those key levers, and we talk about governance, awareness, engagement, research. What are the pillars that needs to be happening in order to implement that agenda domestically? That's on one side. On the other side is really, what are the basis and the foundation that we can use to start building a Canadian indicator framework? So what's happening right now is that Stats Canada is currently looking across all federal government, look at all program policy and set of indicators that are associated with this, and try to identify which one are contributing in the best way in each of the goals. This will serve as the basis, those two documents will serve as a basis, as a second wave of engagement that will be happening over the fall in order to identify action and to validate the approach taken. So basically for the first portion of the strategy, which are the pillars, we want to know from experts, are we on the right track? Are those the right levers that Canada need in order to be successful in Canada? And on the Canadian indicator framework, we really want to know, are those indicators the right target? Is that the reality, the narrative that we want to tell under each goal? What does poverty mean here in Canada? Is the market basket measure enough to define that goal? The SDG is not replacing departmental work. The SDG is telling a story about how we'd leave no one behind here in Canada. So this is really the basis of the strategy. So, like I said, the strategy needs to be diverse to basically touch every portion of Canadian and all level, and mainly inclusive. And I'll talk about that when talking about the indicator framework. So that's my moment where I talk about the funding program. So, an important piece is creating new partnership. It's a modest funding program that has been put in place, $4.6 million a year. But we really want to have fun project that could help inform the development of an innovative and a successful implementation of the Agenda 2030 here in Canada. So the funding parameters are quite vast. We want to fund research, we want to fund data work, we want to fund anything that could be helping us creating that narrative that people can see themselves in it. The grants portion of the funding program was launched on May 7th. Oh, 1 minute. And a contribution portion will go there. So I'll go quickly about measuring in a SDG context. So as I mentioned, there's tons of tons of indicator. We need to create a Canadian context that tell the Canadian story outside the global indicator framework. The global indicator framework, like I said, those 252 indicators only 65% of them are relevant in a Canadian context, and we only have 50% of the data related to them. So that leaves us enough space to breathe, to create our own reality. We're not going to shy away from reporting on the global indicator framework. That's one of the role of the unit, and we're all the time going to continue reporting on this, on the StatsCan Data Hub. But what's going to be part of the main strategy is to really identify priorities that are aligned with our realities, with realistic target and relevant indicator. So we want to, I'll go quickly over it, but I really want to focus on that slide. We want to have a Canadian indicator framework that will be limited in number. We don't want to create a new indicator framework with 1 million new indicator. We want to focus our attention on 1, 2, 3 indicator per goals in order to create those trajectory to see where we need to put action and money behind in order to change these trajectory. And we want to be simple because that agenda is talking to everyone. So we want to make sure that we don't talk in a way where people don't see themselves. So there's multiple data gap right now that we currently have and we are working on with StatsCan. We are starting to evaluate who's left behind in Canada related to the data associated with the SDG. But definitely, if any of your organizations working on vulnerable population, working on indigenous data, and we had a discussion, multiple discussion related to indigenous integration into the Canadian indicator framework. We really want to hear from them how they want to be seen in that Canadian indicator framework. Do they want to be part of the massive work onto the data disaggregation that we're going to go about? Do they want to have separate indicator like in other countries? Do they want to define new targets that they see themselves into the framework? So, and another challenge is the data disaggregation. We want to be able to provide tools to people, to Brian, to other here that they can use and tell their own story locally. The SDG is about localizing the SDGs. The approach that's going to be taken municipally, provincially, by businesses will be different. So in order to be useful, we need to give them the data that they want. So measuring progress, the only two known, and last minute, the only two known is basically that Canada will do another voluntary national review before 2030. That's kind of mandatory. And that we're going to report all the time. Each time that we have new data set associated with the SDG, they're updated live on the SDG data hub that StatsCan is having. So each time you go on the hub, it's the most updated data. As for the reporting, we're engaging right now. We want to hear from you. What's the frequency of report that Canada should be doing related to the strategy? Is it yearly? Is it is it every 2 years, 4 years? We want to hear from you. So I'm here to ask for help. So there's a lot of work that is coming over the next 6 months. There's going to be a lot of engagement. There's place for everybody to be part of the process. So I encourage everyone to reach out to the unit and be part of the work that we're doing with all of you. Thanks a lot.